Every project has a story, the wins, the challenges, the lessons learned in the trenches that too often get forgotten once the job closes out. In each episode, we sit down with the project managers and construction leaders who've been there and done that on some of the industry's most challenging builds. At VPO, we believe that sharing these real-world experiences makes us all better at what we do. So whether you're dealing with schedule pressures, budget constraints, or just trying to keep a complex project on track, you're going to hear from people who've walked in your construction boots. Today, we're talking with Justina Hyland about the Reimagine Adobe project. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. Hello, Justina. How are you?
Hi, Laura. Great. Thanks for having me.
Wow, we're really honored. I want to really share with the audience your experience, some background about you. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about the three different areas in project management, about how, a flagship project, and then how the approval of that project happened, and some of the stories or challenges that you faced around the approval. And then we're going to talk about what happened when you broke ground, in other words. Mm-hmm. And then once the project was done, what would you tell your younger self about your experiences in managing the project so that we can really leverage your experience and talk to how people who are new to the industry or new to project management can benefit from hearing it from you. So first, why don't we listen? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at Adobe and how you ended up leading this project, Reimagine Adobe?
Okay. Well, my background is in facilities management and construction management. So for many years, I worked for a facilities outsource contractor. And I then moved to Silicon Valley. So then I started working for high-tech companies in Silicon Valley. And after about I guess it was about after 20 years of working or so, 25 years, I changed directions and went to work from the high-tech company I was working for and went to work for Adobe.
What was your starting role?
Oh, my starting role was as the facilities operations manager for the site in downtown San Jose, their headquarters office.
Okay.
So started with that. Then what happened was that the company decided that they wanted to change up the way people worked, and because all of the office spaces it had in the downtown headquarters office were all closed offices. So everybody had a private office. And the problem with that is that, everybody wasn't really collaborating closely together. They were mostly sitting in private offices. And so you'd come into work when you come into work for the day, kind of close your office door. And unless you were going to another meeting or something, you pretty much that's where you worked all day long, isolated from conversations with other people. So I was tasked when I first got there with figuring out how we would renovate the offices. And there were actually 3,000 offices that had to be modified
Wow.
and opened. And so that was a big project, and we just kind of figured it out as we went along. So my role was really, I was the facilities operations manager for the site, but also started the work as project manager / construction manager for all of these renovations we were making.
And so this was Adobe's headquarters where all the executives were working, and a lot of people.
And a lot of people, yes. Three different towers. They were high-rise buildings downtown, or still are. And it was 3 different towers that we were attempting to renovate.
Why renovate? From everything I have known from working with Adobe, everything's outlandish and great and, brand new. And, what made the project be a renovation versus a new build?
The reason it was a renovation is because the buildings were built in the 90s. And what most people would say if we would ever ask them to describe the buildings in Adobe was that they look like bank buildings. When you'd walk in,
just what you think about as Adobe,
right? Your first impression was not, oh wow, this is the most creative, colorful space. It looks like a bank building. So and since we had, so prior to taking on this project, we had done for 4 years, we had been renovating the office spaces. So we were making those vibrant and colorful and open and really that was really changing the culture of the company because of that. And so it was really kind of timed to change the way, visitors and others perceived the company, and in addition to what we were doing for the employees to make that change in look and feel. And just to kind of remind everybody, during this time, Adobe had changed from being a box software company to having their software in the cloud. So huge change for Adobe.
Competition.
Right. Well, in
for
terms
talent.
Yeah. For talent, we were always thinking about, we had 4 different generations of workers in that building, which was constantly changing. As one generation left, you've got new generations coming in, and the newer generation at the time didn't want to work in a bank, right? They wanted to be creative. They wanted to feel creative in spaces that, that kind of had that vibrancy. So there was a lot going on at the time that we decided to go ahead and make this renovation change. And if I can continue for a few more minutes with this story, when the renovations that we did do, they were our 5th iteration of figuring out what we would do to make that space be more creative, more innovative.
Why 5? Like, why so much iteration?
Well, we codenamed it when we finally got to it, Take 5, because because at first, we had big grandiose plans, right? Adobe had always wanted to build a 4th tower, hoping to perhaps utilize the space where there was another existing building that would have kind of attached to our existing 3 buildings. But the company that was there they decided not to sell it. So many years went by. Adobe always wanted to buy that building. It never came to fruition. So
it was an energy company that was there, right?
Yes, a utility company. And they never wanted to give up the building or sell it. So the only option was, at the time, felt like, well, we got to figure out what can we do with the existing space that we have. And so there was a lot of different options that we threw out there until we got to the point where we said, let's just renovate some existing space that we have.
And I guess the executives were all for it. So you don't have to really try to push this project through like so many other companies have to, and have to go through all of the,
they knew it was time
to getting it.
Yeah, they knew it was time, they really did. And so that part was easy. The hard part is they had a budget number in their mind.
Right.
And they just threw it out there and said, here you go. Good luck with, here's what we want you to do.
As opposed to
with this amount
trying
of money.
to estimate how much based on the scope of work of what they wanted. It wasn't, well, that's how executives are, right?
That's
what they want. And you deliver it.
That's right. They knew how much money they wanted to spend. They knew what they wanted to accomplish. And, that's kind of, and that dollar figure kind of came out of looking at the other options too. So that number was kind of the number that kept getting floated with anything else we were proposing. So that's why it just stuck. And so,
and what was the number?
$60 million
back then. So that was pretty big.
It was
a pretty big endeavor.
It was a big budget, yeah, but it was a lot to accomplish in a short period of time, and a modest budget.
And did you ever think like you're crazy to try and do all this for $60 million, or did you feel like you had enough budget?
I felt like
to do what they wanted.
I felt like we had adequate budget. I felt like we would, no matter what, we would be able to accomplish that. We may not have gotten everything out of it that we wanted, but I was, really hoping, because it felt like at the time, now this is in 2014, that we would be able to do it based on construction cost and labor cost at the time and where we were. Yeah, there was never a moment. Well, there was a moment, but there was, for the most part, the team and myself, we all thought we could make that happen.
So what was unique about this project, other than people being in the buildings while you were actually renovating it, obviously, it was broken out. You had what, 3 different cafes? Tell me a little bit about the scope of what the project was.
Yeah, what we were trying to accomplish was we were going to renovate a couple of existing cafeterias that we had. We had to expand them because they were the way they were built years ago. We didn't have as much space as we needed, and that's back of house space for prep and all that stuff like that with the
Mm-hmm.
existing cafe. Um, One of the cafes that we ended up doing work on was just a little bistro. And it was just a little space on a existing floor. And we ended up taking that entire floor for the new cafe. So it really got a big expansion. And then the last one that we did was a brand new build from scratch. And it was right off the main lobby, the one that we considered to be the main lobby in this renovation. And it was a sandwich shop. And all these years, it had been a place that we called Area 51 because because they called it that because there was so many, it was just the junk place to send everything. Anytime you wanted to save something or nobody know what to do with something, it went to Area 51. So, and Area 51, the good thing about it was it's just a beautiful space. It's right on the main floor of the building, and it had a lot of beautiful windows. But we had them all covered up because, of course, all the junk was inside there. And it had an opportunity where we could build a beautiful outdoor patio.
Oh,
And so it was definitely, it was space that was just, it was being underutilized. So that was a really wonderful part of the project was being able to do that.
so
Um,
tell me about picking architect. I assume that
mm,
that was a very mindful thing that you had to do. Make sure you found the right architect that really understood Adobe and what you were trying to accomplish.
well, I would kind of bundle that with, how we pick the architect and the general contractors, the team, the core team of this, because it's kind of all the same story. And that story is that we, for years, had been trying out a lot of different partners to work with when we would do the renovations on the work floors. And the one thing that we realized is that we were going to have to pick a very strong team to do this work because of the speed and because of the scope. And so we ended up going with a Gensler as our architect because we had been working with them for quite a few years. And they knew how we worked. We knew how they worked, and we knew it would be a really quick ramp up. So we don't have to, we'd have to train another architect on
Yeah,
on how we worked, right?
right.
And the same thing was said for the general contractor. Is that the general contractor we chose actually built the buildings
Oh,
originally, and they knew
wow.
yes, and they had again been doing all the renovations for the most part throughout the building's life, the life of those buildings. So they just knew they knew how it was built. Plans or no plans. The PM that worked on it, he was original PM, one of the PMs from when the building was constructed. So that part was a no brainer. That part was a no brainer. So
Wow.
that's kind of what we did. We knew we couldn't just start with fresh contractors or architects. We needed people who already knew how to work with us, and they knew the buildings.
That's fortunate that you could
Hmm.
find people that knew that much.
I don't think it could have been possible without doing that. There would have been no way. Yeah.
So, what was the biggest challenge you had in the startup phase of the
Mhm.
project? You got it approved, but before you broke ground, or was there anything that you remember that, oh shit, what are we going to do with this before it even started
Mm.
construction?
Well, budget was huge, right? That was a big thing. Um, and we had to develop, concepts for each of the spaces. We had 11 different spaces that we were touching. And we really in order to get that first budget, we first had to come up with that first pass concept. And at the same time, we were designing the first phase of the projects. So we had a combination, right? We had a combination of spaces that were already in design and spaces that were still conceptual. And though we were trying to build a budget based on that scenario, which was, concept budgeting is much higher than if
Well,
you have
yeah.
something, right? So that part made it a little hard to figure out what that reality was really going to be. And the first pass that we got was shocking. and and so we just knew that, I mean, we knew we had a lot of work to do, and we knew that it would evolve as we started getting better drawings. But it was kind of scary there for a while, determining if we were going to meet the budget that we had set forth.
Who were you working with on the Adobe team? Executive wise, like who was your customer, even if it was internal?
So our sponsor was Donna Morris. She was the senior executive for the human resources team, and for our team, she actually led the real estate team as well. And so she was the person that was responsible for making all the decisions about, day-to-day decisions, or, that we had to make in anything related to schedule or budget. She was our person. It would go to the board, the board once we had decided, what we were going to do and what changes we're going to meet. It did have to go to the board for review and approval, but that wasn't there was only a couple times that had to happen. So mostly it was, we got the direction, we got the schedule, we got the budget, and most of the items that we were going to do just got approved by her directly.
And so what would happen if you delivered news that you didn't want to deliver, right? You don't want to disappoint your customer and or your stakeholder in this case, but how did you learn the skills? Or, I think project management has a lot of soft skills that people don't really consider before getting into that line of work. How did you take a situation and present it to someone like that?
Well, what I have learned throughout the years working with executives, you don't want to cry wolf too early. So, you don't want if you think you're not going to be, any of those, you're not going to meet any of those targets, you try to pull them in, right? Before you go and say, oh my God, we think we can't do this. I mean, I have learned, you have to just keep working at it and keep trying
what
to
is
find
pulling it in mean?
Well,
what does that mean?
So give you an example, our first pass budget was $80 million. So we were 20 million off, which is a lot of money to be off, right? So I think what you end up doing is within the team that you have, kind of getting whatever it is that's forcing that number to be higher than you expected, kind of getting teams together to brainstorm about how to improve on that number, right? Or if there was a schedule issue, same thing, we would just kind of realize, oh, we got a schedule problem, so let's see what we can do to work through that. And that's where having those experienced general contractors and architects really came in handy, because they knew us enough to know that we don't move schedules. Right. Don't move schedules. And that's
not even going to be an option.
It wasn't, or we're not going to get to budge on budget. The only time we get to budge on budget is if the internal team had decided we needed to do something bigger than what we were designing for in order to make that impact. We probably could have made we could have made a case for that, but luckily we were able as a team just to work together to be able to get that dialed in so that we could, so that we were able really to deliver on the budget we were originally approved for.
I think project management is really an art. It's always it's all critical thinking at every stage of the game, right? And nothing is ever going to happen like you think it's going to happen. So
and sometimes it's a leap of faith. It's sometimes experience tells you that you can take a leap of faith and say, we're 20 million over today, but I'll bet we'll get there, and just have that faith in your team.
Optimism.
To get it there. Yeah, I think so. Someone's a gut feeling, like you go, well, it's just a gut feeling that you get that I know that we can do this. And it's based on your experience that you had with other things you did to know, oh, I know we can get to this number. I know we can make this happen. And this is what I know about people and teams, is that people will always, I think it's innate for people to say, I can get that done. If you task me with this and you give me permission to figure out how to get it done, I will. And if you have, like, we had a very experienced team on our hands, right? We have Gensler, and they've got a lot of resources, and we had DEFCON, which is a local general contractor, been in business for a very long time. They really could figure out how to construct the project maybe a little differently than the architect had envisioned and still get the same result. So that's a lot of teamwork for the GC to say, well, here's yeah, you proposed we're gonna create this beautiful ceiling using this manufacturer's kit of parts, but we think we can do it another way and save you money. So there's a lot of that, and there's got to be a lot of trust,
a lot of collaboration,
a lot of trust between the general contractor and the architect in that sense, right? And then a lot of trust for like the owner, because the owner has to say, oh yeah, I know you two can collaborate and get that done, because
and support you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And not make you, have animosity between each other. That's
and there
so
are dark
unique.
days. There are dark days, right? Where especially because sometimes there's conflict. I don't think there's any project that doesn't have conflict, and this one was full of conflicts because of that particular issue. Because there was other things going on too, because we internally have people at Adobe, branding team, employee experience teams. They want a certain experience for the employees. The branding team wants it to look a certain way and feel a certain way, and they don't want to compromise on that. So it's sometimes the compromise has to come from internal and then translate to the contractors and change the drawings. And so that there's a lot to it that goes into it just to get to where you want to be. But I mean, again, luckily our team internally and externally had a lot of experience working together and making such decisions.
Moving into the construction phase, right? You've got your architect, you've got your contractor. What does that look like? Think back to what were you trying to do early on once you started actually doing the work? And how did you monitor the progress on a regular basis to make sure that you were checking in to make sure that you are on time? Sounds like on time was even more critical than on budget, but I'm sure both were just as important.
Boy. Well, we also had an external PM that worked with us, Nova Partners. They were fantastic. I think it really, because it was such a complicated project, so you got to think we were designing one phase and starting to build it when we were then on to designing the next. There was this overlap.
Waterfall.
Yeah, kind of confusing sometimes for people to remember, well, what space is it we're talking about? Which project are we on? And sometimes there was conflict in, did everybody have the correct drawings? Did on the project that we were working on?
What happened when they don't? Tell the audience what happens when people start working through the wrong drawings.
Well, then sometimes there's change orders. You're going to lose some time and some money because they're building to the wrong set of drawings, right? Hopefully you can find out pretty quickly, and hopefully it's it's probably usually when the MEP team is in the very beginning when they're doing all their work, and you can kind of figure it out. But that's the kind of stuff that can happen when, well, we didn't have a really solid communications tool to manage drawings. I mean, we did it, I think, more of an old-fashioned way where we drawings were submitted and they were put on a document platform that we had, management platform that we had, but it was sometimes hard to tell which was the most recent version of drawings. Yeah. So I think that can cause problems too. Having a good, a good communications construction management tool to use would have made things different for us too, which we didn't at the time. We were
in other words, you needed VPO.
VPO. That's exactly. I mean,
little plug.
It's true though. It's true, because I think that was one of the biggest headaches we had, is managing all that documentation for these 3 different phases in just folders
and email, probably, right?
Oh, a lot of email and documents and folders. And I think that sometimes caused a lot of confusion with the team. So there was a lot of, heavy communications of how to keep all of that straight while we were going through the project.
And so this is a project where people are working right next to you, right? I mean, you've got
Uh-huh.
Adobe, who is trying to become, the high tech giant of the world, and productivity is going to be top of mind of, hey, don't disrupt my people from getting their work done, right? You
Right.
have to make
Right.
sure that, you're not disrupting their job. Like, what do you think was the most challenging of having to work around the people that were working there?
What was challenging the most is, I mean, we were disrupting things like their parking and where they could eat and how they could enter the building, how they could bring visitors into the building, because you have to remember in each phase we were renovating a lobby. So then that lobby would be closed. So people would have to, we were
Rerouting.
rerouting people, and then we were blocking up the parking garage various times. The loading dock sometimes would be have to be blocked off, and so that then all of our shipments of whatever materials and stuff that would go there were coming in through a different part of the building, just kind of disrupting the flow of people's day, and so we had to have a lot of communication. We also for the teams, and we had the communication came in different forms. There was email communication, there was town halls. Um,
Oh,
yeah, there was different conversations with different teams that were being impacted. Our CEC, for an example, we were renovating the Customer Experience Center. So we had to change locations of where they held those briefings and kind of create an environment for them where they could still hold the briefings without having their own place anymore. So there was a lot of shuffling and there was a lot of disruption, but we felt like as long as we could keep communicating with the employees at the site, they wanted the end result we were going
right.
to bring to them, right? So we kept saying, we
They were
know
your
this.
cheerleaders.
That's right. We know this is painful, but here's what you're going to see in the end. And we just kept getting in front of them and showing them what progress we made and communicating an email. And I think that helped a lot. We have a really strong comms team, and they, just from the very beginning, developed a plan that we executed on, and it
Transparency.
was transparent. And the executives were great about stepping forward and communicating themselves. So it wasn't just our team communicating. We had the executives saying, hey, this is very important. This is why it's very important. And once everybody knew the reason, it wasn't just to make it look pretty, but there
Sure.
was a lot of other reasons than just making it look pretty. And it was important for all the other teams that were working in the building as well. And of course, in the end, it was fantastic, but everybody had a lot to do. We had a lot of parties, I would say, when which was good too, because then when
Like swag, your
there,
version of swag
yes,
when,
yes, yeah, so we'd have
making
like
people feel
to
good.
celebrate certain things that got completed, or to give people a sneak peek even before it was done, to say, here, let's
Oh,
see, here you can kind of take a quick
yeah.
look at where we are, and and we had renderings that we would put up everywhere around the campus so people could see, even though they couldn't go down a hallway to where the CEC was being renovated. We had big pictures and everything so they could see what was actually happening behind the scenes. So it was really important. The communication and the change management was huge. We couldn't have done it without it.
So far, the messages are people, getting the right people on the project, and
Yeah.
then communication. You can't over communicate enough. You
Right.
said there was more to the project than making it look pretty.
Mhm.
What other things were top of mind? What were the other things that were important to Adobe about this project?
Yeah, I think one thing that stands out to me is that, we work with the city very closely, as you might imagine. And we were really good. We've always been good partners with them. Adobe had been, gosh, at this point, it's probably been downtown for well over almost 30 years. And our relationship with the city had been very close. Adobe had always partnered with the city to help improve the downtown. And then, so when we were trying to going through take 1, 2, 3, and 4, we were actually spending a lot of time talking to the city. And they were giving us feedback about what they wanted to see downtown. And one thing they always said was, like, we see all of you people from Adobe going into the building, but we never see anything happening. Like we don't
Then
know
leave.
like the people
Like a
in
black box.
yeah, it's like everybody goes in and you see people come up and leave in the evening, right? So really what they wanted to see to help the city feel like it was thriving too was to actually have something where they could act like the people in the community could kind of see the buzz and see what was going on inside Adobe. So they wanted it to change too. They wanted to see it a little bit more vibrant and bright and colorful, and they wanted to see us kind of activate the outside of the building because we had a huge, not just the city sidewalks, but big sidewalks and outdoor space right in front of the building. And so as we would go and share our ideas with them, they just kept giving us feedback about what they wanted. And so, making sure we were good partners with the city was one thing. I think the other one is, trying to retain and recruit younger talent too,
Yeah.
and bring them to a space where they want it to work. I have to say that, Silicon Valley and high tech, the workers are extremely spoiled, because, in a lot of places in Silicon Valley, I mean, all the perks are part of the deal here in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's got the coolest gym? Who's got the best food offerings? What are the cool things you can hope to expect when you come into a campus like that for a high-tech
That's
company?
great.
So
Yeah.
ours needed to be ramped up because all we really had was offices and some lobbies,
Old school.
one place to eat, right? I mean, so it was
Closed offices are
clo-
unique now, everyone
um,
being a closed office. We're going to share the video that you provided
oh,
for the
yeah.
people listening to this podcast so you can see what you started with and what you ended up
Oh,
with,
that'll be
because
great. Yeah.
it is amazing. I've had the luxury of, touring some Adobe facilities, and it's just, I've never seen anything like it. It is the coolest, environment. I think from my perspective, I could tell that Adobe really wanted the people that work there to stay and live there, as if it was like not just their job, but their lifestyle, and, like amphitheaters and, different things, and the gym and the rock walls and no wonder, no one ever saw you before or after work because you're always in the building
Everybody's in
having
the building.
fun and
That's
the
right.
pods and, relaxing
Hmm.
and a lot about wellness. And,
Hmm.
the struggle is real, how
Hmm.
people work today. And I've never seen that. And I've never seen them, another company, care so much about the community that they're in. I know there's other office locations that Adobe has, and I had the luxury of touring Utah, and Utah's Lehigh building, and all of the art and all of the things that Utah's known for, incorporating that into the build is amazing. So
Yeah, it was really, I mean, there was certainly some core values that Adobe just wanted to make sure that, that were apparent, that you didn't have to look at what the values of the company were on a sign to know what those were, right?
right.
Right. And I think that's a lot of it too. And I think that, I mean, we definitely wanted to tell a story too. Every space that we built, we came up with a story about it and what it was supposed to mean and we were supposed to accomplish in that. So they didn't just say, okay, here's some money, go build it. But here's some money, but before you start doing this, this is what you need to figure out. What is the story? What's the story? We had to, we did all these studies about we had 3 lobbies. Well, what lobby was going to be the main lobby? It didn't have to be what it was before. It just had to make sense. And we had to know what was that story, and then
What was the most interesting story, or memorable story that you were like, wow, that is super cool? Do you have one in particular, or?
Well, the one cafe that we built in the Almaden Tower on the 6th floor, it was the story behind that was all the orchards in San Jose. So San Jose used to be, I mean, they grew before it was high tech, and they grew cherries and all these different fruits and vegetables.
Wow.
It was called, oh my gosh, now that I'm trying to think of it. I'll think of it in just a second. But the area was just known for for growing all of these fruits and vegetables. So, and that goes along with the wellness and the sustainability story of, of us sourcing local foods from local farmers to serve that to our employees instead of just buying frozen foods. Everything had to be healthy, and it had to be fresh, and had to be sustainable. And come from, I think, less than 500-mile radius. And there was, that was important. That was a value. So we that would design that space using all these old crates from, the crates like where oranges would be delivered in, or tomatoes. The Dole plant used to be a Dole plant was here. So they processed canned tomatoes and all these fruits and stuff like that. So we were lucky to find all of these old crates, and so that kind of told the story of the area and what it used to be and represent, and how that was still a value, for the way we wanted to feed the employees of Adobe too.
Before we move on to close out, because that's the concept of this podcast, was there any one lesson you learned through the construction phase before we talk about, anything else about the project? Like, is there anything that you would go back and warn yourself on day one of construction that you obviously could have learned after the fact?
I think the one thing that we knew, we had some risks that we, knew that we, depending on what the city would let us do. And one of the risks was partially around this particular cafe is, how are we going to exhaust that kitchen? Because it was on the 6th floor. And we kind of made an assumption that they were going to let us exhaust that outside the side of the building. And it turned out that they didn't let us do that. So we had to build we had to exhaust it by building an exhaust.
Like a ventilation system?
All the way to the roof. So you're on the 6th floor. You had to go all the way up to the 18th floor to build that exhaust and have a scrubber on it. And so there were a lot of things like that maybe we assumed, but really didn't build in that as a risk. And I think we would have been better off maybe spending more time on those risks. I think we were, again, trying to be very optimistic and thinking that everything was going to turn out the way we wanted to turn it out. I mean, of course, in the end, that all worked, but it did create a lot of pressure and stress on the team. The other thing is, we had designed, we're thinking about creativity here again, designed a fence that was going to go on the outside of the building. And that cafe I talked about, that used to be Area 51, because it had a lot of space and that's what the city wanted. They wanted to see our employees out and eating on the sidewalk. And so we built this beautiful fence, and it was designed very artistically designed. Well, we couldn't find a fabricator to make it. So, we had thrown that out there.
Why?
Just because of how customized it was. And I don't know if it's in the video or not, but so that we lost a lot of time on that, and we ended up not getting that done in the phase it was supposed to be done, because it took so much longer to find someone to fabricate it and to install it. A lot of other things that were involved in this. There was a lot of waterproofing issues, because it was, that patio where that was going to be is sitting right on top of the parking garage below it. So, so there was a lot of challenges, but those were a couple that were really big challenges that we hadn't really thought through a lot before we committed to doing them.
I think that's what's so fascinating to me about the construction industry is all the unforeseen conditions that you deal with, not only in the upfront design, but through construction and through closeout. So bringing us to closeout, would there be anything that you had done differently looking back? It was I guess maybe some things you wouldn't have control over. Was it appropriate to phase the projects like you did, or would you tell management something different, obviously, now that you had done it, but what would that be?
Well, we couldn't have done it all at one time, because nobody would have been able to work in the buildings. We would have had to close that down. So we had to phase it. We didn't have any other choice. And I think that turned out to be okay, the
Yep.
phasing part of it. Mm. I think we could have used more time. And what I mean by that, I think we could have used more planning time up front as a whole team. We tried to approach it like we would have in any other floor renovation or single project,
Mm.
right? And trying to set ourselves up, and because when you begin every project, the team has to make decisions about you know how we're going to release drawings, right? What that cadence going to look like, how we're going to work together, on meetings and when we change orders, and all of those decisions that you have to make up front, we were making on the fly as we went.
Was
And
this the biggest project you did? Like, was this a really large project compared to the projects you were managing at that time?
yeah, because at that time we were doing one floor renovation at a time, sometimes two, and those
Mm-hmm.
projects were about $3 million each.
Whoa.
And right. And they were less disruptive. We were just, the most disruptive thing was we had to move an entire team to different locations to work until we could get them back on the work floor. But this was 11 projects built into one on a very tight schedule, with a tight budget, and just a lot of moving parts that I think we should have. And this was all part of me too, being saying, oh, we can get all this done. We can do this in 18 months, but not realizing how much more planning we should have done before we just started working. And
That's a common theme we're going to hear from a lot of guests on our
mhm.
podcast and a lot of owners. I hear that a lot, and just talking with people is better planning up front will be smoother construction.
Yeah, and you
But
don't think
you're
yeah,
pressured.
you're pressured. You're pressured to start. And it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, you're pressured to start. And the thing is, you just, and you think, yeah, we'll get through it. But it could have been easier. And the one thing I learned about myself is I should have delegated more. I should have out front maybe suggested we had more people that could handle some parts of the project that I was taking on, or I thought I could take on, and do this at the same time. So that was a little unrealistic of me too, to think that, because even though we had an external PM, I was still the internal, taking care of
Mm-hmm.
that. And it was still a lot more than probably I should have taken on by myself. So I did learn that as we went and started to do a lot more delegating. But it was, like I said, it wasn't, the project wasn't like our normal projects. And it just didn't, I don't think I really knew how big it was going to be until we started getting into it.
So this was a while ago. Was it common to have a female as a project manager at that time? And is there anything that you would tell another
Mm.
female PM taking on a project like this? Or
Mm.
did you feel anything different? You know, um, is being a woman helpful in your career as a project manager too? And if so, how?
It wasn't as common, but it started, like, I would say in the, in early 2000s, you started to see a lot more women in construction in general. And I think really what I would say about that is that I think being a woman, or this is how I felt, is like I always had to know everything. I felt like I had to, like if we would talk about something in a meeting and I had no idea what they were talking about. Oh my God, I went out and researched it. And because I just didn't want to look like the one who didn't know, what something was or a term was. I mean, I'd freak out to myself thinking, oh my God, I got to know this. I think it's okay, no matter what gender you are as a project manager, not to know everything. And if something comes up and you say, I don't know what that means, or I don't know what the consequence of not doing that will be, that makes you a better PM. I think the times that I was scared to say I don't know was that was very insecure of me, and something that it took a while to be okay with saying, I don't know what that means, and explain to me how that will impact us. Or because you have to make a lot of decisions on things.
Probably a
Maybe
maturity thing too. It's
it's
not
a
a gender thing.
right.
It's a
Yeah, it's a
you
maturity
have more
thing.
confidence now.
But I think initially when you start out, and again, you thinking, well, I'm sitting in a room full of people that are mostly men, right? And I need to be the one, I need to
Right.
be as smart as they are. I think it's detrimental when you don't say, if you don't stand up and say, I don't know, because there's probably other people in the room that don't know either. And
Absolutely.
that's what you don't understand, that maybe half the people in there, boy. Yeah, what is a Victolic fitting? I mean, right? Why are they all breaking? Whatever that is, right? You just
Yeah.
but you try. I'm googling, and it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to say, okay, really don't understand what that. Tell me where that is. Why is that
Yeah.
happening? What? And so that I think I learned later, and as I did these bigger projects too, is it's okay to say, I have no idea what that is. Can you explain that to me?
That's good advice. Any other advice for younger, more inexperienced people listening as to what you would do, or same lines?
Yeah.
How do people come up to speed? Your job in project management is so based on experience, and
Uh-huh.
like you said, it's a people thing because people who have experience. You started out this podcast talking about you were so lucky that the contractor had built the building. Well, what if the contractor hadn't built the building? Or,
Right.
when you don't have experienced people, what do you recommend people do in that scenario if it's themselves or people they're working with?
I think the most important, and the thing that people do the least good job of doing, is really writing down their own processes, right? Being really sure about, what your role is, what everyone's role is. So, the thing that I learned to do was develop a RACI or a DACI, whatever you want to call
Mm-hmm.
it, before every project. So we understand who the players are,
Who's responsible for what,
who's
accountable for what,
right,
for people who don't know
right.
RACI?
That's right. And that's if you sit down and figure all that out, it'll all fall into place. If everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, I found on this project we're talking about here, the Reimagine San Jose, is that we had people trying to fill in the gaps where they thought maybe we weren't managing it, right? Because we weren't. There were some times where like, oh, well, we are really short on this, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then you find people who don't have the role to do that, thinking they need to come in and fill that, and then that causes confusion,
More, yeah.
more confusion. And I would just say that planning, if you can right at the beginning, make it clear to everybody what their roles are, who is the decision maker, who's driving the decisions. That is so critical to anything you do as a project manager. It doesn't even matter what it is. It's construction or anything where you're managing a project. That's got to be one of the things that you do. Big lesson learned for me. Very big lesson.
Thanks for sharing that. So as we wrap up here, I'm going to ask every guest this question.
Okay.
Now, if you could go back to the beginning of your career and give yourself one piece of advice based on everything you've learned, not just from this project, but from your entire journey, what would it be? And maybe that was it. So maybe you answered it without even addressing this question. But, you're nearing retirement now, you've got so many years of experience. What would you really like to share with people?
You can't do it all yourself. You have to have a team. You have to trust the team that you've set up. And that'll make you a stronger person, because you can't, no one person can do this all by themselves. You don't have all the ideas. You don't have to have all the ideas. And it's better if it's not all your idea, right? It's, better ideas come from collaborating and brainstorming with other people and getting their feedback. And I just always thought I had to be the one to come up with the ideas and to make all the decisions. And really, you don't have to be the
perfect.
one.
In
Be
other
perfect.
words.
Yeah. No, project management isn't about being perfect. It's about knowing what resources you need and using those different resources instead of, you're not supposed to be the doer. You're supposed to be the one figuring out how to get it done and with what resource you need to get it done. And so that's something that took a really long time. Like I said, some of that's maturity, some of that's just experience, but it took me a long time to figure out that was my role. And my role wasn't to be the doer of everything.
You should be the predictor, maybe, is a way to know something before it's going to happen to be able to course correct.
Be the driver. Make sure people are getting it done. Drive, right? But you don't
leadership.
Leadership is big. You've got to be a good leader. And you got to know and you got to have fun. I think that's the other thing I would say. We used to find ways to have a lot of fun in these projects because you need that comic relief when you're, making all these big decisions. And we would just come every project.
What would you do? Like what would be an example of fun?
Well, I used to have this bicycle horn that I would take to the meetings. And then if somebody did something really good, I would honk the bicycle horn, or if we as a team had some kind of success, and we turned that later into, we had a bell that the person who did the thing that was really good, they got to go up and ring the bell, and so those things. And then, I don't know, we used to have, sometimes we would just have
parties,
like a toast before if we succeeded in something, because you got to celebrate your wins, because you can't just keep going without stopping to say, oh wow, we kicked butt, we really did something really good on this, and let's celebrate that. And everybody appreciates that because they're so used to run and work so hard. But every once in a while, you just got to take that time out to bring in lunch, or bring in cakes, or whatever you bring in to get the team.
It's still
just
a people
feeling
business.
Like it's different.
People have feelings, right?
Right. And people are stressed, and you've got to, especially, people are always, in that mode of, again, trying to perform, and they have to deliver, and all those deadlines can be very stressful. So you've got to find time to have fun. Yeah. It doesn't have to be serious all the time.
I did want to ask one other question and we'll wrap up, but what can people do it is so stressful. So how do you go your day-to-day, like with that level of stress? And what do you suggest? I mean, actually, Adobe has pod rooms, right? Or whatever they're called, where you would go and de-stress as an employee. But as a construction manager, like you're dealing with deadlines and stress every day. How do you take care of your mental health so you make sure, things don't get so bad that you feel so bad, right? And that can really lead you down the wrong path through your life, right?
Yeah. You have to get good at managing your schedule. Don't let anybody manage your schedule for you. Don't go to meetings that
take control.
Take control of your schedule. And that took me a long time to really figure out. Until one of our executives at Adobe said to me, you're in charge of your schedule. Nobody else is. You don't have to go to that meeting, right? You decide. That's really good. That was a good lesson that I was told. But I think the other thing I learned is to leave a lot of the work at work. Before COVID and we were all working in the office, just cut it off and leave it and come home, have the evening with my family,
decompress,
and then get up the next day. Even if, we started early sometimes, 6:00, and started some meetings sometimes because we couldn't fit them in any other time. So we start 6 or 7, but at least have that time to decompress at home and have that time with your family and do the things you need to do so you won't be stressed because you didn't get stuff done you had to at home, especially when you got kids that are going to school. There's always something they need to take to schools, and you don't want to be that parent that didn't get that done. So it doesn't hurt. You don't have to come home and do emails all night long to be successful. That's what I would say.
Great advice.
Another thing that takes a long time to learn.
Right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I thought emails on your phone was the best thing, like the best technical advancement, until I got emails on my phone. And then you go on vacation and you're like, bing, bing, bing. It's just oh my gosh. It's like too accessible. People, I guess I'm showing my age now too.
No, but it's true. I mean, that's I think email has just been, it's good and it's just bad at all at the same time, right? Because It's what makes people not turn it off.
But to your point, you got to just say no.
You do.
You
Well,
know, you got
have to set
unwind.
boundaries. You have to set boundaries because you cannot work 24/7. You just cannot do it. You'll burn out for sure.
Yep. Well, Justina, thank you so much for sharing your experience and being our first inaugural guest
Yay.
on
Thank
our
you for having me.
podcast. Thanks to Justina Hyland for sharing her insights and war stories from the Adobe Reimagine project. These are exactly the kinds of lessons that make the whole industry stronger. So thank you so much, Justina. If you're working on a complex project right now, you know how valuable it is to learn from someone who's been through it before. That's what we're all about here at VPO, building better together. Got a project story worth sharing? Reach out to us. And if you found value in today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share this episode with someone who could use these insights. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and remember, every closeout is just the beginning of the next great project.